Yes, so Auburn fans are going to be more excited if they have hope that the passing game is going to be better.
Mm,
And I
hmm
guess that
That
starts with Peyton Thorne if he's able to fend off all comers and win the job again.
Yes. So I think obviously every year for the last, 4, 5, maybe 6 years, there's been a question about who's going to be the Auburn football quarterback. Is there a competition? Is there someone better than who's currently there? And we've been just going through this scenario almost in my eyes. Just I'm tired of it kind of. And there's a little bit of that trying to be stirred up this year. Should Peyton Thorne be the starter? If you look at the depth chart, you've got a Peyton Thorne who played last year and won by the end of the season, won the job outright over Robbie Ashford. Robbie Ashford's no longer here. He's moved off to NC State, which leaves behind him Holden Garner, also Hank Brown, who is a guy who was brought in by Hugh Freeze when he first arrived, who got some playing time in the bowl game and had a pretty good, at the very end of a bowl game, a pretty good time. And then newcomer Walker White. So that's your four names right now that you really look at who's in the race to be the starting quarterback. But to me, and what I'm trying to get most Auburn fans on board with is you need to make peace with the fact that Peyton Thorne's your starting quarterback until proven otherwise. Yes, there is a competition. He has to go out there and earn it. And the other guys have just as much opportunity to go out and win the job too. But you can't take away the guy's experience. He's now had a full year under Hugh Freeze. Yes, it's going to be maybe a different scheme, different offensive coordinator now, but you can't take away from the moxie that the guy clearly has and showed at times this year. So it is a question of, is there a quarterback battle? To some degree, yes. But to me, it's Peyton Thorne's job to lose at this point.
So, Kyle, is there a guy, whether he's ready or not, or could be realistically expected to be ready, that seems to be the future that the fans love? He's got the high ceiling, he's got the big arm, and we're just waiting on him. And hopefully he can progress faster than most and he can be ready and knock Peyton Thorne out of the starting job week 3, week 4, something like that. Or is it just a matter of we're going to go with the least damaging quarterback kind of deal?
I hope we're not doing the least damaging quarterback again this year, or whatever year it has been over the last several years. With that question, everybody's minds right now, if you're an Auburn fan watching this, is Walker White. He's the true freshman coming in. He's got all the intangibles, all the accolades out of high school. His numbers look great. He's got the charisma. He's got the leadership qualities in terms of being a guy that you can rally behind. He was instrumental in making this one of the best recruiting classes that Auburn has had in quite some time. So all the pieces seem to be there for Walker White. The big question for me, and I think for Auburn fans, if you're being reasonable, is that going to translate immediately into success as a college football quarterback? Just because you have success at the high school level doesn't mean it's going to carry over immediately to the college football level. Sometimes it takes a season. And so to me, I think if you ask that question to the general Auburn fan, the name is going to be Walker White. And I'm excited to have him here and what he potentially brings to the table, especially in kind of some of those off the field things, the way he behaves as a leader, acts as a leader, has guys rally around and to him. Those are things that have me excited for the future. Now, can he push Peyton Thorne for the starting job to begin the season, later on this season? I think he's got the capability to do it. I just don't necessarily know that it's going to be happening. And I want Auburn fans, us to have a more healthy perspective of this year and not to be itching every single time Peyton Thorne may not do something that you like, calling for Walker White to come in. Now, if he comes out and wins the job, I'm all for it. Like, let's go. Let's roll with whoever gives us the best shot to win. Let's just don't, well, as you said, use the least damaging quarterback. But to me, the battle is mainly between Walker White and Peyton Thorne. Holden Garner, I think we had hoped he would burst through at some point, and it hasn't happened for whatever reason. I don't really know the reason why. There's also a contingent of fans that are really excited about Hank Brown and what he did in the bowl game, and I love seeing him out there having a good time. But I don't see those two at this moment as, I hate to say legitimate contenders. That's too strong a word. What I really mean, can't think of anything else at the time. But to me, it's a Walker White and Holden Garner battle at this point.
Yeah, talk about not being able to come up with the right terms. I was thinking of lesser of two evils, and that's
That's a
where
good
my
one.
mind was. But I was thinking I don't want to associate that word with a quarterback battle. Let's not go to that extreme there. So we'll go with the way it was phrased
Sure.
between those players. So if Hugh Freeze gets his way, if he is able to develop this offense and get it to where a Hugh Freeze offense is playing at its maximum,
Mhm.
what is expected out of the quarterback position? Is there a certain style, a certain set of numbers that would be applicable to, okay, this team has arrived, they're playing for an SEC championship, and this is what the quarterback produces?
I think it's consistency right now from the quarterback, and whether that's consistency in numbers and taking care of the football, I think it really is across the board. I think that's what Auburn really has lacked at the quarterback position over the last several years. We've had guys with great athletic ability who can run really well with their feet. And several of those, Peyton Thorne, I've talked with you several times here, surprised me. You swore up and down, Kyle, you need to pay attention to his legs, and I didn't listen to you, and you were right. We've got guys that are better, gunslingers. Peyton Thorne's got a pretty good arm, and he showed that a lot last year in some good deep balls. So I think consistency, well-roundedness, this year, leadership quality, I think, is what's going to win out. And as I just talked about with Walker White in this battle, I think he's got some of that as such a young kid, which would make him probably the legitimate number 2 candidate for this at this point. But you just can't take away experience. Peyton Thorne's been around the block. And I think that's what's going to win out in this. I think what I understand about Hugh Freeze and his offense, since we're seemingly giving him, or I shouldn't say giving him, he's taking the reins back a little bit, bringing in Derek Nix from Ole Miss as his offensive coordinator. Some see that as a proxy of sorts, but he's the offensive coordinator. He's going to be involved in the play calling too. I would say with the quarterback situation, a guy's got to be able to move the ball down the field. And right now, all we know is that the one who can do that the best and the most consistently is Peyton Thorne. Did he have some slip ups last year? Yeah, sure. But there's a lot of other parts to that equation, moving the ball down the field, maybe throwing some deep balls. You got to have wide receivers actually, going to catch the ball, which is an integral part of that, and get your blocking down too. So to me, maybe I went all around your question there. I think consistency is key. Who can air it out the best? I think those are probably the things that are going to factor most into the decision for play calling and quarterback situation.
What was even more concerning to me about the lack of quarterback production is that the running game carried this team in large spurts. And when that happens, that should open up things for the passing game. That should
Sure.
take some pressure, put people in the box, do all those things that create a balanced situation for the quarterback to succeed. And this team played the likes of Georgia and Alabama to the wire with little passing and able to carry it on the ground. And that didn't open up the passing game. So is the ground game going to be able to thrive coming up this year based on the personnel coming back and just based on probably having to, again, take that step forward to lead this offense?
I think the personnel is there. Jarquez Hunter is back. Last year had a bit of an off-season issue. We'll just leave it at that. That kept him out of the very first game and some other time as well. And it frankly kept him from getting off to a good start. He really, I can't remember what game it was at this point, but it took him a while to actually have one of those stereotypical Jarquez Hunter games where he is just running all over people, running over people, jumping over people. But I can distinctly remember that game in my mind, just not the team we were playing, where I just saw, okay, Jarquez is back. Took him a while to get there. You talk about Jarquez Hunter. You've also got names returning like Damari Alston, Brian Battie, and Jeremiah Cobb. A very similar situation here is kind of developed between the incumbent of sorts for the quarterback situation and the running back. So you got the Walker White versus Peyton Thorne dynamic in quarterback. You got the Jarquez versus Jeremiah Cobb dynamic. Jeremiah Cobb showed us that he's ready to compete at the college football level. Now, is he an every down back type of guy? I don't know. We'll see how the offseason treats him and how he treats himself during the offseason. What I know is the dude can run the football between the tackles, and boy, is he fast on the edges, where you saw him have some success a lot. So I think you're going to see Jeremiah Cobb have a little bit more time and a few more carries this year. But Jarquez Hunter is the guy. And there's a reason that he was pushing Tank Bigsby several seasons ago when he first arrived on the scene for time. It's because he's just an athletic freak of nature. At times, Auburn last year really kept themselves in the game with a running game. A lot of that was because of what Peyton Thorne especially was doing with his legs at the quarterback position too, opening up some opportunities there. But you're right. It didn't seem as the success that was being had by the running game didn't really open up the passing game as much as it seemed like. And so that's kind of like when we were talking about the quarterback situation, who can air the ball out the best, but keeping it about the running backs, the personnel is there. I'm really excited about this group. I think a lot of people sleep on Damari Alston, who's effectively number 2 still right now in the depth chart. I think this group, if they step up to the level that they're capable of this year, Auburn will have one of the best running back rooms in the SEC.
Jarquez Hunter, almost 1,000 yards, despite that slow start. 7 touchdowns, caught 18 balls out of the backfield. You may be thinking of the Ole Miss game when he had 15 carries for 91 yards, and then that surged him forward for 3 consecutive 100-yard, well over 100-yard games against Vandy, Mississippi State, and Arkansas.
Yeah, that one definitely is the one that I was thinking of. I felt like there was one sooner than that. But, I don't know that necessarily it was the off the season issues that got him off to the slow start. It could have been just the fact that he missed a little bit of time and everybody else had a few more reps than him. And, it was a little bit more in sync with everything there. Listen, this is a team sport. The running back situation is affected by how the quarterback plays and especially by the offensive line play too. That's improved at times last year, but it's not improved the ways we need it to. But there's also some of this that falls on the running backs too. They've got to play a little bit smarter, make some better decisions on cuts and things like that. There's room to improve across the board, and that falls on the running back room too. But I think with experience, the skill sets that are quite a variety, and I didn't even mention Brian Petit. Let me throw that in there too. He is surprisingly strong for a guy that small. A lot of people kind of dismissed that he would be able to run between the tackles, but we saw a ferocity from that guy that I dismissed too. So I think there's unique skill sets, experience at the running back room that's really going to serve Auburn well in the running game.
I cannot promise this, Kyle, but I will try to make this the last time I mention how atrocious the passing offense was last year, only because we're going to talk about the wide receivers. 124th in passing offense, 90th in pass efficiency, which is a more accurate metric for me. So simply bad in the pass efficiency department. So looking at the wide receivers, I see 4 signed in this 2024 class. So you've got this influx of highly touted players coming into the program. Sam Robert Lewis is a Georgia State transfer who had a big year for them a couple years ago. Jay Fair would be the most productive guy coming back with 38 catches.
Yep. I think you laid it out really nicely there. I think the big story for this group is, are they finally going to rise to the occasion? It's a group smattered with a few prominent returners, some returners who maybe haven't risen to that occasion and have had plenty of time to do so. It's also a group with a lot of new faces, whether you talk about transfers, whether you talk about young talent that's coming in. But really, it's just they need to rise to the occasion. People ask me all the time, at least that's one of the prominent questions, who's going to be Auburn's best wide receiver? Or when they ask that, I ask, what do you mean? Do you mean receptions? Do you mean most reliable? I kind of lean on a familiar name from last year because they had a great connection. And when I say they, the assumed incumbent at quarterback, Peyton Thorne, he and Jay Fair had a pretty good rapport. So I think that is going to be your leading wide receiver, maybe in receptions and yardage and stuff. But I think when most Auburn fans talk about the wide receiver group, they're talking about Cam Coleman. And that's it. I mean, that's all that you'll get the focus on. And I try really hard to remind people, hey, there was a really good group overall brought in this year, at least perception wise. Cam Coleman and Bryce Kane, who are on campus right now. Perry Thompson and Malcolm Simmons are not on campus yet. And yeah, that remains to be, I would assume they'd be on campus by summertime. Some people get in early, but Cam Coleman is it. And when you look at Cam Coleman, if you see some of the footage coming out of campus, it's hard not to almost, this is a gross word, but salivate over the fact of his measurables are just incredible. He matches up to the prototype of a Hugh Freeze offense. So there's a lot of hype building around this wide receiver group. But my question still is, will they rise to the occasion? Because just because you look the part doesn't mean you'll actually show up. We had a guy named Duke Williams come in as a transfer several years back, looked the part and showed up a little bit, but had some off the field troubles, couldn't, keep himself on the field. So to me, we need someone to rise to the occasion. Some of us look the part, but who's it going to be? Jay Fair, I think, is a great candidate. Cam Coleman is the fan favorite, but there's several other names that people need to be paying attention to this group. And that's just where I'm at with it right now. I'm just ready to see someone take the hold of the leadership of this group.
And then when you segue that into the tight end position, which depending on the use of the tight end, depending on that particular player, that's that one position that is morphed into this. Tight ends seem to be grouped in two classifications. Is that your blocking tight end? Is that your receiving tight end? What are you going to do with them? Are you more traditional in terms of making them an inline player, or do you spread them out and then they're basically just a wide receiver? So how does the tight end group stack up?
I think you laid it out perfectly there. You could actually lay it out a couple of different ways. The leadership aspect of it, the stats aspect of it, the blocking, who's going to be the receiving tight ends. The name that you think of, Rivaldo Fairweather, had an outstanding year by respects of having a terrible passing offense. Let's keep that context there. That was true, and we can keep talking about it, even if it frustrates me to hear it. But Rivaldo Fairweather is the name there, and he's going to be your go-to wide receiver, receiving tight end from this group. And I was very excited to see him return. You've also got names like Luke Deal and Brandon Frazier, who have been around for a while, who are primarily known as blocking tight ends. But I want to stress this, and we always get excited about stats, the receptions, but I don't think that you can have a successful program without guys like Luke Deal. They're the heart and soul of your program. They will contribute, not the big numbers. Luke Deal's been thrown to and had a few catches here and there throughout his career. But he's got a real special story we won't have time to get into today. And the fact that he got to return is, I think, going to be a big thing. He's a guy I look to as a leader, especially off the field, but on the field as well. You've got some, younger names too. Micah Riley, who's been around for a little bit. Maybe he's going to start getting a few more looks in the passing game to maybe take over, build once Rivaldo Fairweather is gone. And once these other two, Frazier and Luke Deal, are gone too. So that's kind of how I would break it down. How you did the receiving and the blocking, and those are the people that I think fit into those categories the best.
Talking Auburn football, we've got Kyle Loomis here breaking down both sides of the football for us. We appreciate Kyle and join him for all that is Auburn. I know the basketball season not as long as it should have been, but we continue with baseball and spring football there on E2C Network, folks. So the offensive line, I picked up this number today, that between Gus Malzahn at the end of his tenure through Brian Harson's recruiting class, only 11 offensive linemen were signed over the course of 4 recruiting cycles, which is not nearly enough, especially when only one of them was considered a true tackle. I know that Connor Law impressed last year, as was a freshman All-American at center, according to a few different services.
Yes. So that's a very glaring stat when you break it down that way. And it's no shock that the offensive line has been an issue. You and I have talked about it a bunch. Like the wide receiver group, this is part of the problem that Auburn's passing game, much less their offense, has been so horrendous at times. And it's all coinciding together. You've got to have all parts working cohesively. Tackles has been an issue, but I will submit to you that I think 2 tackles that are being brought in, one from high school and one from transfer, are very exciting. And boy, do they have some size on them. And I'm talking about Percy Lewis from Mississippi State, and I'm talking about Favor Edwin. I don't know that Favor is going to start, but it's nice to see a guy of his size coming in to start competing at the offensive tackle position. Percy Lewis, it was a very highly coveted transfer portal guy, offensive tackle, high on Auburn's priority list, and they clearly paid whatever they need to pay NIL wise or just effort wise to get him to come to Auburn. So very thankful to see him filling a spot that is going to be vacated essentially by Gunnar Brenton, the 1 year that he was able to really help us out at that position last year. The other name you talked about, Connor Lew, was the big surprise of the group at center. I don't want it to be lost, though, that Tate Johnson is also a senior, I believe a senior at this point, but an upperclassman guy at this position that's going to provide a lot of depth. And so for the first time in a while, I felt very secure about the center position at Auburn. And that's kind of where it starts. It all kind of flows out from there, right? So that's an encouraging thing. After that, you've got to kind of break it down to some holdovers from last year in terms of they came transfer portal last year, talking about Isaiah Miller, Dylan Wade. They're likely incumbents to potentially start this year. But what I'm most excited about, addressing what you originally started our conversation with in this area, the not great setup for the future of this offensive line. It seems like we may finally have that. I'm going to give you a couple of names to keep in mind for you and for Auburn fans: Clay Wedden, Tyler Johnson, Dylan Cinda, Braden Joyner. I don't think those are names that jump off to the page at you, but they were kind of all brought in around the same time. So to me, I think you are seeing the beginnings of the new foundation being laid for the offensive line. And hopefully this is the year we see them take that next step.